Good afternoon, everyone. Really excited to be joining you this afternoon to moderate this panel. And I am extremely pleased to be joined by such an esteemed lineup of panelists. So without much further ado, let me provide you with their brief overview. As Kamala has noted, you all have copies of their bios, but I will say, starting with Mr. Antonio Ayala, he is a systems engineer with an MBA, and he's the CEO and founder of Riscco, which is an international company based in Panama, dedicated exclusively to helping organizations with their GRC, ESG, and artificial intelligence challenges. So with over 25 years of experience in technology, risk management, information security, systems auditing, privacy, and data protection, and the use of artificial intelligence, I'm extremely interested to hear what he has to say about the ability for AI to enable us in bringing together diverse entities in terms of their governance profiles. Next, we have Mr. Philip Armstrong. He's the Chief Operations Officer of Pan Jamaica Group Limited of Jamaica. And he also holds a BSc in avionics technology. He has completed the Harvard Business School's Advanced Management Program and the Harvard Business Analytics Program. And he has over 15 years experience in the financial services industry with a diverse background spanning both technical and strategic roles. So after his career in avionics engineering, he transitioned to the financial industry and began his journey in New York with Societe Generale before returning to Jamaica in 1988 to join Citibank, and then later embarking on a significant tenure in various senior management roles at the Sagicor Group in Jamaica. He later joined Pan Jamaica in 2019, the Pan Jamaica Group. Rounding out this panel is Mr. George Gobin. He's a consultant with Digital Acceleration GTC InnoVision of Trinidad and Tobago. Sorry, GTG InnoVision. This is a Florida-based firm delivering technology and consultancy services to accelerate digital transformation in the Caribbean. He has over 40 years experience in the IT industry, including senior roles in both the public and private sectors. George previously worked as a Group Chief Technology and Information Officer at SM Giglio between 2015 and 2021, where he led global infrastructure, business intelligence, cybersecurity, and innovation efforts. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this afternoon and bringing your wealth of experience and expertise to this panel. And as instructed, we are going to flow according to the lineup. So first of all, I will now ask Antonio to please deliver his 10-minute overview of what he wishes to discuss today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. The first thing that I really would like to say is give the thank you to the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute for letting me, in the next minutes, share our practical experience performing different projects related with artificial intelligence and corporate governance. And the second thing that I really would like to say is ask to all the participants, I apologize, as maybe you are aware of, my mother language is not English, so if you listen some potential word that is not correct, please accept my apologize. Having said that, and in connection with the topics that we are to cover today, I believe that most organizations in the Caribbean, even Central America, most of them have a common question these days. And one of that questions is in connection how we can uphold effective governance in an area where artificial intelligence or even generative artificial intelligence is transforming everything around us, from strategy to operation and even ethics. And from our view, the context behind this is today operating with a strong technology disruptions is not just affecting business model, it's a challenging how we can govern itself. It's not the same establish a corporate governance strategy, policy, process, and procedure for different organizations through our regions. Doesn't matter if it's a public government institution, or it's a private hospital, or it's a fintech. At the end, create a governance around that is today has not been quite easy. And one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that generative artificial intelligence or artificial intelligence, we cannot see that as another geeky digital tools around us. No. Today, from our perspective, artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence represent a turning point around this. And why? Because using generative artificial intelligence means sharing intelligence, aligning policies across different entities or structures in a regional area, coordinating oversight, or even get a very structured legal process and procedure, or even create policy and procedure considering the cultural difference that we have, even if we are in the same region. But the truth is that today the challenge that organizations face in connection to a structure, a corporate governance, and a diverse structure of entities is really important. It's not easy. Today, we have to acknowledge that sometimes that is not overlooked. And one of the things that we are quite clear, at least at Riscco, is that corporate governance is not one size fits all. A regional development agency, as I mentioned, a fintech, a listed conglomerate of companies around the regions, dealing with different legal obligations, different regulators, different operational risks, and even the public perceptions. Today, organizations have to face challenge, many of them. We don't have time to cover all of them. But one of the challenges when we participate in different boards, some of the directors, I would say every three or four always are mentioned two things that I keep on my mind. The first is the pressure to provide transparency from stakeholders. And the second is the expectation to manage risk proactively, not reactively. And in that case, we have to, how can I say, integrate corporate governance. But sometimes corporate governance integration not necessarily means a centralization policies and procedures. It's not about flattening differences. It's about building bridge, creating system where different entities that can share or align policies and procedures and decisions to ensure a best way to act, a best way to operate, even if they are not identical entities. We need, when we create corporate governance integration, we are talking about to create consistency without rigidity, oversight without the famous micromanagement, or create autonomy without silos. And here, from our point of view, of course, is where artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence comes in. And the question could be how? Tell me, Antonio, how artificial intelligence, or particularly generative artificial intelligence, becomes an enabler, an integrated governance. And I will give you and provide just 3 examples on that. The first is artificial intelligence can support standardization with flexibility. How come? Artificial intelligence can analyze documents. Just imagine, review a 200 contract in a few seconds and that a generative artificial intelligence provide not just a summary, but potentially when you compare with a regulation or even with an internal policy, where that control is failing behind our policies or even for the regulator. Artificial intelligence can, for instance, review cross different policies from different entities in different regions or even countries. Artificial intelligence can create some kind of templates that allow local customization, keeping one direction in terms of integrate corporate governance. In fact, we have been helping some organization where using generative artificial intelligence with any of those tools that are ready in the markets is creating a lot of more efficiency to some of the, for instance, the secretary of a board committee, or for instance, the secretary of an audit committee or risk committees. The time that they are saving is a huge. That's one example. Another example of real-time data-driven oversight. Said again, real-time data-driven oversight. And what we are talking about on this, today, generative artificial intelligence tool can process tons of terabytes of information in connection with financial reports, financial data, operational risk, SSG metrics. And just keep in mind that you can keep all this information in a secure way within the premises of the organization. And any director from a board can start to ask a question, as you probably has been doing using ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, or any of those. Just imagine a director asking to a software something like, tell me what is the top compliance risk that we are facing this month, using all the data that previously they have in the databases, using regression model of any kind of things. Just thinking about, again, using real-time data-driven oversight, that a director can ask things like, what are the top risks this month in connection or against this regulator? Or for instance, asking that maybe could be, tell me when in the past 10 years or the past 5 years, we face the risk, etc., etc., etc. That's the kind of thing that generative artificial intelligence can assist and help to the corporate government to become an enabler. And a third example is policy harmonization across entities. You can imagine that you can provide to generative artificial intelligence tools 200 policies and procedures and ensure that they are have some kind of harmonization against local regulation of each country. To close my view and to respect the 10 minutes that they provide to me is artificial intelligence is not about replacing leadership. From our view, artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence assist and provide to a corporate government point of view, be more informed, be more connected, and be more proactive. Artificial intelligence, and maybe we at Riscco and myself, we are wrong, but artificial intelligence, as we see, is not a decision maker. It's an enabler of trust, clarity, transparency, but about all of that, how can I say, a resilient leadership. Having said that, thank you for these 10 minutes, and back to Carmel. Thank you, Carmel.
Thank you to Antonio, and thank you again for sticking to the time and providing us with lots of interesting ideas to go through, especially as it relates to your insistence that, you know, there is still a role for senior leadership in all of this, and that you cannot abdicate your responsibilities. So now as we go on, we'd like to turn our attention now to our next speaker. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up again. Okay, Philip. Hello, Philip. Thank you very much.
Hi, Carmel.
Yes. So over to you now for your 10-minute overview.
All right, thank you very much. So I think where I'll start is that I will kind of give an overview of our current business, how it is structured, and then from there just then tell you how it is that we govern today, I guess in a non-AI way. Highlight for the participants where I see the governance gaps that we currently have, and then maybe discuss some possible ways in which we can close it, and then some of the challenges I see going forward for us as a company in taking advantage of AI and its possibilities. So Pan Jamaica Group is an investment holding company, and we have 4 distinct lines of businesses that we operate, and they're all very different. So diverse is what we are. We are in real estate. That's one bucket. Our next bucket is we're in logistics. We are in consumer goods, fast-moving consumer goods, and financial services. So you have, if you look at financial services in terms of that, as very regulated, which comes with its own challenges. Real estate, which is heavy capex, to businesses that are light in service. And so to add to that complexity as well, we also operate in 30 plus countries. So the primary businesses are in Western Europe, in the UK. We're in Spanish-speaking Caribbean, in Central America, of course, Jamaica. So our businesses outside of the complexity of running 4 different types of businesses, it gets more complicated when you factor in other jurisdictions and cultures, of course. So that's how we're organized as a whole. And my responsibility as COO is to ensure that I am responsible for managing the performance of the businesses. So how do we govern today? So we generally operate in a decentralized way. That is, the leaders of each business has a responsibility for driving its performance, etc. But the one thing that we do centralize is how we actually manage the governance playbook around that performance. So we require that each business submits to us on a rolling basis a 3-year plan that starts out, and that's governed by what we call some critical business initiatives. So steps along the way over year 1, year 2, year 3 to get to that ultimate goal, and then from that we frame up the relevant KPIs to manage the business, and then that rolls into your 1-year budget, and then to manage the performance of that, we meet with each business on a monthly basis where we go through the P&L for the month, and then quarterly we'll do a much broader and longer meeting, reviewing the strategy, asking ourselves the questions: is it working? Is it not working? What's working? Etc. So we kind of start out, and then we come in. Now, the reality of all of that, again, now setting the basis of the fact that we're in 4 different types of businesses and different types of cultures, etc. That even though we have a playbook, what I tend to get is very inconsistent reporting. Meaning, each CEO will prepare their deck a different way. Their spreadsheets with the financials will be a different set of financials. So what it actually done is actually makes it hard to compare performance or even extract group-wide insights, because everything is presented in very differently. And then sometimes what comes with it, because of that inconsistency, is the challenge of really ferreting out, the link, the strategic execution link between the KPIs and the strategy in terms of how well they're performing, and are we monitoring the right things or not. so, those are two initial gaps that jump out at me when I was thinking about this for this panel. So obviously, I mean, I guess the easy one is you could always have AI, be somewhat of a governance prep assistant, I suppose, go through the various documents for you, analyze not only the PowerPoint presentations, the spreadsheets of the financials, suggest, questions that you could ask of management, another, possible use case and, based on the gaps that we have identified, would be how do we flag any kind of strategic drift, based on what the KPIs are sharing with us, and the inconsistencies in what's being reported to us by the business heads, etc. Those are all possible use cases, and they're probably more if I were to think a little more deeply. So I think for us to move towards, I mean, I'm fully convinced that this is that AI definitely needs to be used and definitely can be used as an enabler to make my life, well, not only make my job easier, but also to improve the way in which we perform is really twofold. It's really going to be more around discipline around in our data structure. How it is that we gather that data, the templates, the historical consistency of capturing that data, etc. And I think probably more importantly is to get leadership of our various businesses to think of AI also as a thought partner. In particular the LLM or the chatbots type, to help us think through the various challenges that we face as business leaders. Because we know what we know, but we certainly don't know what we don't know, and it's a good way of I guess learning from others that you would have never met before. It's kind of how I look at it. So when I look at how to govern our business across the various divergent businesses, I don't think I need more data per se, because I think we have all the data that we could use, and what and with it the promise of AI. Just think that we now need to really think through how to roll that out now, and also importantly, as I said earlier, to get leaders to start thinking about it so that they can use it to make their life not only more, make them more productive. Let me say that, and to be able to move their businesses ahead faster. So I will leave it at that. That's generally what we are confronted with, what I'm confronted with, in terms of having all these diverse entities that fall under my portfolio, and how I'm thinking about using AI. I usually, at least once a day, been trying to get myself in the habit of asking, whenever there's a business challenge or problem, my first question now is how can AI help me with this problem or with this challenge? And I found that a very useful question to ask, to get my mindset in that frame of mind for the future. So so that's it. I'll leave you with that for now, Carmel.
Yes, thank you again, Philip, for taking that through that personal experience of how you use AI within your own business and encourage other business leaders to embrace it. And now, finally, we turn to George for his reflections and thoughts for the next 10 minutes.
Good. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you, Madam Moderator, members of the CCGI team, the panel, and of course, ladies and gentlemen in the audience. I really appreciate this opportunity because I'm working in the field where I'm not working directly with one single conglomerate, but because of my consultancy role, I do spend a lot of time talking to conglomerates. And more importantly, I also speak to lots of companies who think and act like conglomerates. So that brings a whole new dimension in how we need to start thinking about it. I want to take a little bit of a different role in terms of all you've been hearing about, and maybe talk a little bit about, the theme of this conference is generative AI. And I really want to look at it a little bit differently and make sure we understand the basic concept of when we say generative AI, we're talking about AI that makes stuff. It creates content like text and images and video, and we go after sources of data that you can know, ask questions, all of that. My take on it is that the other forms of AI that are coming out are going to be much more important than the ones. And of course, you have each company has its own organizational structure, where one team will be looking more at generative AI, some will be looking at agentic AI. But agentic AI for me is the one that has the most impact, will create the most impact on organizations. And just simply, agentic AI, I said that generative AI creates stuff, agentic AI does stuff. It takes action. So I want to make that clear, this distinction between both. And another presentation, I'll talk to you about 8 other types of AI models that are quickly becoming available for very niche markets. I sometimes talk to people and they say, well, yeah, I know what AI is. I use ChatGPT. And I have to tell you, if you become proficient in ChatGPT, that does not make you an AI expert. And then I hear other people who tell me, well, I'm not really concerned about AI. To me, that's artificial ignorance. Well, okay, maybe that's another definition of the word AI. And the other 2 topics that I want to touch briefly on is really data and data quality. And the final topic will be elephant in the room. Will AI cause us a loss of jobs, and how does that impact, especially conglomerates? So there's no doubt about it. We're at a pivotal intersection in corporate culture. We have diverse risks in corporate, diverse culture, obligations, a conglomerate that brings a lot of complexity into organizations. My 2 previous panelists have talked about this complexity where you have large organizations. And here comes AI as an enabler to really, and this is the key word I want you to take away, complexity meets capability. So we can have as complex in organizations as we want, but AI, using a tool like AI as an enabler, we can now get complexity to meet a capability to handle all of this later. So let me give you some examples. Maybe I like to talk about examples all the time. In the Caribbean, we typically have a complement of conglomerates that typically are between 40 and 80 companies. I've had the privilege of working for the Neil and Massey Group for a number of years when they were at their prime in terms of having over 80 companies in the region. So a lot of that experience that I would have had in those days, and you take a simple exercise of preparing for a board meeting where you're getting data from all kinds of different sources, different islands, reports are coming to you by Word documents, email, WhatsApp, or whatever the tool was at that time. People are sending you reports, and just preparing board minutes is an exercise in frustration. And then you get these board minutes out to directors, and you and I know they don't read it until they're coming to the board meeting or while they're waiting out. So we've got to find, ways of how do we get information to the people who are going to make decisions. And here is where I've started seeing AI absolutely doing a fantastic job of, one, synthesizing insights. If I look at data across a company or a conglomerate, I want to get insights. I want to look at predictive risks and alerts based on historical patterns. I want to look at dynamic dashboards that are tailored to board committee, whether you're meeting for audit, whether you're meeting for risk, whether it's ESG. And more importantly, as a director in a company, I want to get summarized board meeting minutes where I can get the gist of a board meeting rather. And that's what AI enables us to do. I'm not deleting all the original information. It's still there if I need to go check it. But now I'm looking at summarized information with red flags yellow flags, green flags, to tell me what, as a board director, what do we need to focus on in this board meeting. When I look at conglomerates, and I've worked with a couple of them, they have a couple of fairly standard challenges. Group consolidation of accounts. It's a major challenge in any conglomerate that you talk about. First, you have, as we said, cultures, countries, languages. You have what we call in the industry horizontal and vertical applications. So horizontal application may be one that spans the entire organization, things like messaging systems, email, and stuff like that. And then you'll have niche applications that are vertical, and they're all churning out various types of data, various types of formats. This really leads me to the next topic of data and data quality, which is what I consider to be a core essential of how we're going to have to manage AI. This panel discussion, we talked about AI as an enabler, but I want you to leave with one word or one sentence out of this presentation. It would be, data is the fuel for AI. For any successful implementation, you must have data accuracy, or you will your AI model will make wrong decisions. And several panelists have talked about that. I'll give you a quick example. Last year, I dealt with a medium-sized company who thought that they were a conglomerate because the amount of data and stuff that they had, and they wanted to help. The chairman said to them, everybody's talking about AI. We need to get AI. Okay, call George and see if he can help. I said, yeah, I can help. That's for sure. If that's what you want to do, we can do AI for you. But let me ask you a couple of questions first. A standard number of questions. The first one that I threw at him was, what's the status of your inventory accuracy? He said to me, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I think it's between 50 and 60%. And I said to him, well, I think we should, we want to do AI down the road, but we've got to focus on getting your inventory accuracy as close as possible to 100%. Otherwise, if we put an AI model in, it will not give you the correct results. It's dealing with bad data. So I tell most organizations, if you're going to do AI implementation, you've got to look at data profiling. You've got to look at data governance as against corporate governance. You've got to do data quality and accuracy. And as many panelists before me have said, you have to look at data privacy and data security issues. So as you look at large conglomerates, I talked about vertical applications, we talked about horizontal applications, and we talked about vertical applications. You may have a group of companies that's into cars, grocery chain, retail, soft drinks, beer, whatever it is, a lot of devices, and they all use different applications, different hardware, and different database type environments. So the problem that we see that coming into these industries, we have moved away from data marts. We've moved away from data warehouses, which is to be very static and very, very strictly used. And we've gone into something called data lakes now, where we are bringing sources of different information into the conglomerate and trying to do standardized reporting and checking the value of data. The problem that we are seeing is that we don't know when the data is wrong. I'll give you another example. A CFO presenting a report to his board, when he does a fancy dashboard and it's all looking great, green lights, red lights, and graphs, it's fancy. And the first question that somebody have asked him, well, what do you know about the accuracy of your data? Because it came from a subsystem in the company. It has been manipulated 2 or 3 or 4 times to get to this fancy report. So that means another employee in the organization has touched that data. How can you as a CFO tell me that your data is accurate? That's another level of what we have to think about. And I tell customers, listen, don't wait until the data gets into your data lake to clean it up. you've got to clean it up at source. If it's coming into your system, you have got to clean it up there. You've got to use metadata. You've got to look at your drift analysis. You've got to look at your data privacy. And then you have this topic that I like very much, and I could talk for hours on this, is who will guard the guards? If most organizations now we're hearing fancy job titles, data engineers, data scientists, data analysts, chief data officer. It means that data coming into organizations are going through many people, and you have to trust them to deliver the data that you are looking at and making more decisions. And the data is where you're going to use to make AI as your enabler. So lots of things can happen along that way before the data gets to you. And I tell people, talk about access. If you don't know what your system administrator, your data engineer has access to, then you are never sure about the quality of the data. I have a case in Canada where a system administrator who was a lowly paid, they tend to be who work night shifts and stuff like that, but he had access to corporate data, and he sold the bank's customer information for $250,000, and nobody knew, because he had access to the systems and there were not enough audit checks and balances in place. So access to even corporate data is something that we have to spend some time and focus on. So if you decide to implement AI, and I tell most of my customers this, you will obviously, AI is going to replace some processes, maybe some resources, some people. Don't expect an ROI unless within the first 2 to 3 years, maybe. And you've got a plan for it that way. And that's the subject of another longer discussion that we have. And then touching briefly, I know other panelists have talked about it over the period of this week, the elephant in the room that says that AI will cause job loss. And I'm here to tell you today that yes, absolutely yes, AI will cause a job loss, job reorganization. The jobs that will tend to be manual, repetitive, administrative, secretarial, those kinds of roles. I would urge you to look at the World Economic Forum 2025 jobs report that says on average, workers can expect 2/5 or 39% of their existing skill sets will be transformed or become outdated over the 2025 to the 2030 period. So when we think that things are going to happen over a 5-10 year period, the answer is no. Things are starting to happen as we speak and has been going on already. And I started to tell people, well, somebody used the analogy about when we got personal computers. The first personal came out, IBM XT in 1981. And we in IT were very happy to tell companies, oh, we're going to get rid of a lot of people and the roles will disappear. And people can go home early because I can produce a trial balance you at the flick of a button and all those kinds of things. What happened really? The jobs did not disappear. We had to really retrain our staff to take note of the new job requirements that come in. So you found computer training schools. You found schools teaching Excel, Word, PowerPoint, how to use a computer. That's where the change is going to happen. So it's not going to be, there was definitely going to be some job loss. But if you look at those jobs that will be lost, there were really no stimulative kind of jobs. You came in and did the same thing in accounts payable. You was a clerk sitting in at one desk, and all you did was push paper or enter some of the stuff on a computer, and then it moved to the next desk in the chain. That kind of thing will disappear. I'm going to give you another story about, looking at, we designed an LLM for a factory subsystem. As you know, in most factories, the problems that happen in factories tend to happen at night. And that's the time you hardly have people on shift, and you have, that's when things go wrong. We devised an LLM that, for example, it takes all the company's manuals, put them into an LLM and says, when line 4 is showing a red light, it's green, button being pressed here, cans falling off the line. I want you as the operator to go and put in a simple chat GPT-like question, what to do, because the person who knows how to fix it is not on shift. The manuals are locked up in the manager's closet. And those are the kinds of things that we have to start thinking about replacement. A critical point behind all of this is our universities, our colleges. You can't be preparing students for jobs that will not exist in 5 years. We've got to change that. And that is going to impact how we think about what is required in conglomerates, in the small and medium markets. We need a new breed of employee that's coming to the work environment. And that's why I think that sure, AI is going to cause us to lose some jobs, but we have to get around it and say, listen, when we got computers, it got rid of typewriters, it got rid of ledgers, big accounting ledgers, manual thing. And here's where we are today. AI is going to take us to that next revolution in terms of how we use it as an enabler in corporate, in conglomerates, but more importantly, across all organizations. A small organization, an SME organization today becomes a conglomerate somewhere down the line. And if you put those standards and guidelines in from now as to how you will operate, then this is going to be a much better world. And with that, I'm done. Thank you so very much for the opportunity.
Thank you to George for bringing it all together at the end, looking at a lot of the pros and cons, and especially, as you said, from a conglomerate perspective, as an organization, an ORN, which has many multinational members. I could see how very important those considerations are. So now, as we get into the moderated part of the discussion, I would like to go back to to Antonio. So Antonio, you really emphasize that AI is not just about replacing leadership, and it's about enabling leaders to really make better decisions and do a better job. And I wanted to find out, as part of that leadership role, how do you also think that leaders can use AI to foster collaborations down the line in terms of data sharing between different organizations, within groups, within different departments that traditionally operate as silos? How do you think leaders can also use AI to enable and empower those supervisors and managers below them to collaborate across different departments and silos?
That's a very good question. And the answer is not quite easy, to be honest. But the first thing that I would say, that in terms of directors, to become artificial intelligence enabler, is please accept my apologize. Sometimes when I perform this kind of speech, webinar, conference, I'm very strong with my arguments in terms of, and not try to put flower around what's saying, because I believe that the time of everybody around this virtual meeting is quite important. So I will not tell you the nice to have things that people want to listen. Having said that, one of the things to get the statement that you mentioned is to ensure that the board member and top executive understand what's really artificial intelligence means. And that's what sounds like a stupid question from Antonio. But as George said, believe it or not, most people talk about, sorry for saying the name, ChatGPT, Copilot, or Claude, or any of this, And they believe that because some of their top executives are using that, the company has seen the move of artificial intelligence use. And that's not true. Because any of those tools help, but are not artificial intelligence. So one of the first things that I believe to achieve your statement is that top executives really understand what really artificial intelligence means through training, courses, whatever. We in the past, we have been doing that, and it's really amazing how top executives talk a lot in terms of artificial intelligence. When we start to ask, what are you doing in your organization using artificial intelligence, they said nothing. Or even they said, some of my executives are using ChatGPT, Antonio. Right. And they said, that is not the perfect way. And the second thing, and I think that also George said, I'm sorry, George, that I'm telling you some of your speech, but the key challenge for implementing and become an artificial intelligence enabler is data. The data quality and the data integrity with an organization to create regression model or predictive models is basic. And you will not believe me if I tell you that, and I'm not been having data integrity and data quality projects since artificial intelligence has been surrounding around us. Before I decided to run my business, I spent 25 years between KPMG, Deloitte, and Pricewaterhouse, and we perform a lot of data quality and data integrity projects. And it's amazing that organizations that pay 5 or 10 million US dollars for an state-of-the-art ERP, they believe wrongly that the data and the quality keep integrity, and that is not true. So before move on any artificial intelligence enabler, I would say that we have to move first in training and education to top executive, and then to ensure that the quality of the data is good. And keep in mind that quality of data, when we talk about conglomerates of different organizations in diverse regions from a single holding, is a really headache. That is really amazing. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's not possible. But one of the things, just to close and back to you, for any reason, I have been talking with many top executives. They have nothing in terms of artificial intelligence projects. But from overnight, they want, without any project in artificial intelligence, they want to start to use artificial intelligence in the 5 key processes with an organization. That is going to fail. If you don't have anything and you want to start any artificial intelligence project, please start with a single process and see how this is moving. Because believe it or not, as many IT project fails, artificial intelligence project also can fail. So back to you, Ken.
Sorry. Thank you, Antonio. Looking to both Philip and George, before I move on to my next question, staying with that one, as both leaders of multinationals and also advisors to leaders of multinationals, do you have any thoughts on that question as well, as in terms of how the leadership can perhaps devolve the use of AI to create greater collaborations and remove silos?
What I would add, I mean, there's no disagreement that the quality of data always matters. I mean, AI at its core really does one of 3 things. Either predicts, it automates, or it classifies. But the thing with data is you only have data up until right at this point. And so where I think leadership, the appropriate question that leadership was always asked whenever it sees whatever the AI model may be predicting or whatever it is doing, is always asked the question, has the context changed? So, a real extreme example of that would be, let's say you had a credit scoring model, And right up until what day was it? Whenever COVID came around in January of 2020 or February, you know, that model would have still said Philip Armstrong may be a good credit. But, you know, COVID hit. Is Philip Armstrong going to be a good credit if he happened to work in the tourism sector in 5 months' time? There's no way the model would have known. So I think as leaders, the question that we always need to ask ourselves, in a way to test, you could say, the AI, has the context changed? And I think that's a very critical question to ask in its use as a leader. So that's what I would add to what Antonio said.
Points, George.
I agree with Antonio on that point. If you're going to do an AI implementation, you can't start with 5 projects. You start with one, and one that you think is going to bring is critical, one that you probably start learning on, because this is going to be a learning exercise. And I tend to tell companies it's great to use things like ChatGPT, and you inquire on the world's data, and you can get all kinds of statistics and metrics and stuff like that. But your data within your company is your data. It's not supposed to be in the public domain. Are you able to query your data? Why haven't you built an LLM with your data in it yet? Because that's where your information is. It's not out on the net. So, you know, I like to look at people and say, right, great, you've got to learn about AI and the different things. And yeah, ChatGPT is great, Claude is great, all the things. But start looking at your data, ask your data questions. You'll be surprised at some of the answers you may get when you thought that, hey, everything was hunky-dory in your data. And it isn't. Trust me, it isn't.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that, George, and I don't disagree with that, but one of the, you know, I think one of the good things, or one of the possibilities anyway, the way I think executives could use, you know, whether the cloud or ChatGPT, isn't so much in a to get started anyway, to really get the thoughts around what the possibilities, if they use it in a way as a, if I were to use an example of strategic thinking, you know, we're all around the room, we tend sometimes have similar bias, and we see things in a very similar way, you know, is to use one of those chatbots to share, you know, as a red teamer, then, you know, show us what the counterfactuals may be, or in that sort of way to start to, because most leaders don't really fully understand the technicalities of what it really takes to implement an AI. And I think one of the things that these chatbots can help with is to really show the possibilities then, if they start to use it in a way, not necessarily for search results or stuff, but just to give, like I said, you know, counterfactuals. So what if this happened instead? Or what is it that we're missing or not thinking about the possible things? And I think in that way, it can be a help at the leadership level.
Yeah. And maybe just end up that point, I think where we're going to go eventually is the availability of an assistant that's a robot that, you know, virtually sits at the side of the executives to ask those questions, and they go off and find it and bring it up, and the data can be internal or external and stuff. I think that's where the world is going, and that's why I said in my presentation, we've got to start thinking not just about chatbots that are only accustomed to hearing the question come to them in 10 ways. It's really an assistant that understands your language, understands concepts, and is able to give you a more different approach to a result. I hate talking to chatbots and you ask them a question in your mind that makes perfect sense, and they give you an answer that is regurgitated from some question you asked before. Those are the kinds, so we've got to get more sensible AI bots working, and we're going to see that with things like RPA, which is robotic process automation, and we're going to see that with your virtual assistant sitting at the side of your desk, literally.
Yes, just want to add some related comments of what Phil is telling is that not necessarily today, but in the near future, is going to be necessary that some of the director of a board have some basic understanding in terms of maths. As maybe you know, artificial intelligence, what really is behind is integral calculus, differential calculus, mathematics, inference, probability, and statistics. I'm not telling you that a director had to back to a school to become an engineer and be an expert on that, but has at least a basic level understanding. Why? Because today we have been seeing in just few companies is that they really support and believe the outcome of artificial intelligence box. You get inputs, the box makes some kind of decision, makes some kind of prediction, and provides some kind of outcome. And top executive use that icon. At least in the region where we provide services, we have not seen yet that a regulator start to ask to director, and how you know that that outcome is the correct one? Do you know what that black box to generate that outcomes? What kind of mathematical or algorithms perform to provide that? That is called artificial intelligence code auditing. That is something that is happening today in Asia. That is something that is going to happen, I will live in my region in the future, but that is something that we need to take about it, because just to close this point, one of the things that also we have seen is that some companies believe that your IT professionals, just for be an IT professional, understand artificial intelligence. And that is not true. That is not true, because behind, as I said, we have a lot of mathematics. So back to you, Kat.
Thank you, Antonio. I think it goes back to kind of that old adage that they always say, garbage in, garbage out. So you really have to know what, when you're prompting, et cetera, how to be able to ask the correct questions and provide the correct data and information to get the results you need. So Philip, you spoke a lot about how artificial intelligence could be used in terms of analysis, being able to, in terms of looking at strategic drift, KPIs, really being able to use data to enable decision making. Do you have perhaps in your own business, as in your own company, or any others that you're aware of, real examples of where you can point us to, share examples of how AI-driven solutions have helped in terms of that governance integration and being able to really help with compliance, risk management processes, any of the things that you mentioned? Do you have perhaps a model that you can look at where you have within your own company looked at this?
Unfortunately, within my own company, the answer to that is no. Because that but it is something that, based on the work and the background that I recognize is something that we need to do. My unrelated, I was involved with a financial technology company, and we did AI and machine learning credit scoring, and so that's the closest in terms of implementation that I have been involved with. But in my current business, no. But based on what Antonio said, part of the challenge that we have with prediction is that when we hear that, well, we predict that it's going to rain tomorrow, people take that as 100%, right? and it doesn't mean that. Right? It could be 80, it could be 70, it could be 40%. And I think, that's where people get in trouble with these models, is that because it predicts it, they think it's 100% prediction, when many times it certainly is not. And I think that's where the usefulness of math comes in, I think, Antonio, as you're alluding to. that if you understand the basics, it'll allow you to ask the next right question. But what is that probability? What is that prediction? So you can kind of contextualize. But coming back to our own business, I mean, I've seen where each and every one of them, even that some of them are in more mature stages than others, starting to spend the time to think about what business problem that we want to solve is going to become more and more critical. I do think that in time, AI, I think, will be like ubiquitous to being a computer. Meaning, when computers came around, or the laptop, people thought, well, everybody's going to be more predictive and going to save so much money. I think eventually AI will be very similar going forward. But I don't think that you will be able to compete if you don't have some level of AI start to be embedded in your operations going forward. And the biggest challenge that we have right now is focus in many ways, like Antonio and George alluded to. Everybody wants to do 5 things or 6 things, as opposed to let's just do that one thing. I said even that one small thing to use to understand what it is and what it can do before we take on other things. I guess the proverbial let's crawl before we walk. Creep before we walk.
Yeah.
So that, so unfortunately, I don't have a use case within my current business right now, but it's something that I'm working towards, getting us around to.
Okay, thanks, Philip. And so, George, we keep coming back to this idea of picking that one thing, not that 5 things. How would you advise, or how do you advise businesses then? Because obviously different businesses are in different areas, but are there any commonalities that you would use to advise businesses how to pick that one thing that they can use AI to enable?
Sure. I think you've got to realize that AI is just a tool. And you've got to use that tool like you would use any other tool in your toolkit to help you make your business more productive, increase revenue, decrease expenses. Those are the kind of standard things any successful business wants. So you've got to choose some process, some facility in your business that is going to give you the best return on your investment, where you can see, hey, if I invest $10, I'm going to be saving this. So I'll give you some examples, if I may be allowed to. Robotic process automation. In a standard accounts payable or receivables department in any company, you have a line of about 5 or 6 desks, and paper gets shuffled from one desk to the other, somebody stamping or writing something, and then it gets to the end of the line where it gets put into a computer. Now with robotic process automation, we are seeing the invoice that is coming into the company in the first place is being scanned. It has a bot that knows where the invoice number is. It knows the details like money and all those kinds of things that are on a static invoice. It has been programmed that way. So an invoice from one company, we know the invoice number is at the top left, and we know the invoice quantity is there here, and the amount is on the bottom right. So we can predict, scan it, convert it, and we can now enter it straight into the accounting system. It has its checks and balances like, the validations, date and money amount and stuff like that. But I have now got 4 people out of the loop. And I haven't terminated them. I've more moved them into customer service now. And I know at least 3 companies in Trinidad have implemented RPA to that great effect, where they automated through a software robot that whole process of accounts payable, accounts receivable.
Thank you, George. So yes, as you say, making money, saving money, those are the core things that most businesses are focused on. So that is a good place to start. As the time draws to a close, we really should open it up to the audience. If there are any questions, and I know sometimes Kamala herself has some questions, Please raise your hands, put it in the chat if anybody in the audience wants to ask any questions. And there's Kamala.
Thank you so much, Carmel. I really have truly enjoyed listening to this panel as well. And I would have thought as we come to the last day, there's not much new information you will get, but still here we are with very interesting new concepts. George, there's one thing I wanted to ask you to elaborate on a little bit, because this panel has truly ensured that you underscore the importance of data, you managing your data, you controlling your data, and even data governance on a whole. But I heard you mention this movement of what we used to describe as data warehouse to now data lakes. So it's the first time I actually heard that description. Can you elaborate a little bit for us? When you talk about data lakes now, what are you referring to in terms of content and context?
So it's another storage area, but there's a lot more control on your storage area now in terms of data profiling, data governance, and data quality. So let me give you an example. If you are running a sales operation, and for 12 months of the year you had standard sales, what the year you had for Carnival or whatever it is, you have high sales in some year. But if you see a month when the board is looking at the reports and they say, wow, August we had a spike. What caused that spike? Oh, the initial thinking, well, great, we had good sales. But could it have been a data entry error? Could it? And so what we have now are tools that says, let me look at your drift analysis over the last 12 years, the last 24 months, sorry, the last 12 months, 24 months, to see sales in August of this 25 or 2024 spiked. What caused it? And if I can't find no good reason in it, the system alerts me that this is what we call a drift from normal. You don't get those kinds of facilities in data warehouses or data marts. So data lakes have more intelligence in them that allows you to do those kinds of things.
Okay, I'm just taking note of that as well, because it's something that we also have to look into as we continue to raise awareness and help improve governance practices in terms of our directors understanding these movements and growth in these areas as well. And there was another thing that I found that I wanted to ask, and that was the ROI. If you invest in AI, you were suggesting 2 to 3 years. I was taken aback at that, because I thought because a lot of these AI tools can help replace processes and improve efficiency, it would have been an almost immediate return.
Right. So I want to take a step back just to finish off on that data lake question. What I'm seeing in the region specifically is the large companies are already well on the way to putting in data lakes, insurance companies, banks, all those where you have streams of data coming into their systems from disparate sources. Mm-hmm. It's not one standard application. So I'm working with 2 organizations right now that are putting in data lakes, and they're insurance companies, by the way.
And let me just add here too that I truly appreciate hearing that, simply because for the last few years, in fact, forever, we have been lamenting the absence of proper data collection, that we can have accurate data in the region to do our own capacity building and decision making. So I'm happy to hear that. So yes, continue now.
So when you put in some AI systems, obviously you will get an increase in, say, productivity. The accounts payable department, I said, you will probably get an increase in probability in terms of productivity in the accounts payable. But maybe that allows you to maybe terminate 2 or 3 people, maybe, or move them into different roles, as our unions like to hear. But that does not mean that it will impact the ROI. It means it depends on what objectives you laid out for the ROI in the first place. What were you going to achieve? And a lot of companies don't drill down into the detail of that ROI and do perfect calculations on what really is going to be my return. A return on losing 3 people in an organization is a human cost, a people cost. Yeah, I take that out of my budget or my forecast. I'm not going to have it next year. So what do I do? So you have to look at some of the costs that are repeated, non-repeated. And that's why I say when you're looking for impact on your on your organization, look for something that is really going to impact, not give you a temporary reprieve on your cost. And I think that Mr. Armstrong said that it's not always about the easy one, cost saving, right? It's always about the long-term effect of that cost saving.
Yes. Okay, thanks. I just want to point to persons that Monique has put the survey link in the chat. So we would appreciate if our participants can take a minute and click on that link and give us their feedback. There was something else, and this is for Philip, that I don't know if you have said this as something that is intended to be done, but it was such a great idea that when you're in these complex environment, if you're looking at AI as an enabler, there are times when you just don't know what you don't know. So you use the AI to think through the various challenges that can be faced by the business at this time. So is there some particular tool? I know that there are a range of different tools that are being used, but is there something that you've already experimented with in this respect?
Yeah, I mean, I personally experiment quite a bit with ChatGPT as a chatbot, but I don't use it necessarily to answer questions for me, because I do think that's where you will get into trouble, because one, the hallucination, and two, as George alluded to earlier, all it wants to do is please you, right? So so the way I have been using it is really just to I may frame a question of something that's on my mind that I'm trying to think through, and my natural instinct is to say, well, okay, well, this is how I think I want to solve it. And so how I use it is for it to prompt questions to me that I would not have thought about, so that I can go think about them. And so what it does, how I've been using it to help me in that context is to think about other things that I wouldn't have thought about, give thought to, so that I can make a better decision. Or frame the discussion in a different way with my colleagues, so that we can end up with a better decision. So that's kind of how I've been using it at the moment, while we think about how it is that we can really deploy it within our various groups. And we've started that process, and each one is doing it differently. And to George's point, they have to think about what is the project, what real problem are they really trying to solve, rather than just laying off 2 account clerks, right? Because that's not moving the needle at the end of the day, right? Mm-hmm. But that's how I use it right now. Outside of I'm not where I want to be, but certainly helps me think about things differently, as opposed to trying to have it give me answers. So that's why they're making it work for me.
Yes, how that just broadens, your whole mind and enriches the conversation even with others, as you explore more what maybe some opportunities or so, or scenarios that you're looking at of potential
that I never thought of.
Yes. Now, there's one more thing I want to come back to George with, and this is because this has been mentioned a few times over the last few days as well, and that is the idea of your data being in the public domain. So you are saying that your data should not be in the public domain, and that you should create an LLM with your own data. But that I guess definitely can work for groups and conglomerates. They have the resources, they can create this and potentially may be more invested in protecting their data. But for the majority of businesses, they may not have the resources to be able to make that investment. So your data will be in the public domain. How can you make it as secure as possible?
So it's really two things. One is, when I said your data, I meant your company's accounting data, your inventory, that's not in the public domain, meaning that somebody else can't query your data, right? That's your data. It's in your environment and hopefully secure from outside access and all those things. So what we are doing right now with things like ChatGPT, we are querying information that's available in the public domain. And yes, we do have an element of risk in that data because sometimes we don't look at the source of the data or we don't query it. What I'm suggesting is that for us to benefit from ChatGPT, yeah, we can benefit from ChatGPT for the things that it does, and it does well. And it certainly does a number of things. But how do we know what's going on in our own businesses? How do I know the top 10 customers this month? Do I have to depend on IT to run a report for me? And then it takes some time, and by the time they run the report, the data has changed. So I want to be able to look at a dashboard that's constantly pinging my data to tell me, as an executive, I come into the office in the morning, I put on my computer, and there's a dashboard that tells me the status of my organization. Were we down last night? How much overtime we done? How much was the machines done? What was our sales as of 6 p.m.? Things that are critical for the company that you don't want the executives finding out at month-end reporting time. That's too late. It has happened already. You don't have time to go back and fix it. So when I say getting access to your data internally, I'm talking about using tools that do that for you. And you have things like D365, which has a number of tools. If you're using D365, and sorry, that's my Microsoft hat back on. They use things like Copilot and stuff to get in, and Power BI to get into your data. But everybody can't afford D365. So you've got to have the tools. And most of the ERP type applications that are coming out now, they are giving you, it's the way of the world. They're coming out with tools that allows you to query your data. They put it into specific type databases so it doesn't affect your response times on the online systems. And then they allow you to query this. Now, the key here is, to me as an organization, what is most important to me? Is my data as it was at 6 o'clock last night when we shut down? Or is it today, live, real time? Those are the kinds of questions that you will ask before you go into an AI implementation. Where is my source of data and how current it is?
Excellent. And just to touch on a point that Antonio had made as well, which is that you could even ask it, so what is the top risk this month that you face, based on things. So again, very similar to what Philip is saying, use it in a way that's proactive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe I can give Philip an idea. I'm working with a customer right now who they cut the advertising campaign in half by just they didn't realize they had some pretty artistic people on staff, not working in the advertising and marketing, but in the staff. And the staff came to them and said, hey, we started playing around with this DALL-E tool from OpenAI, and we can create our own images and videos and advertisements. And the company has now cut their advertising and marketing spend in half because they're not using their internal people. So that's some ideas of how we could start using these tools to start helping save some money. And as I said, I repeat, organizations, no matter what size you are, we're about increasing revenue, cutting expenses, and having happy people on board.
Very true.
Thank you very much.
I would note we've got 2 minutes left.
So I was just going to hand over to you to say, let's have our panelists wrap up now. You can invite them to give their closing comments, and then we'll bring this panel formally to a close.
Thanks, Kamala. And thank you as well for bringing and synthesizing some of the other sessions into this one to enrich it further. So as we close, we've spoken a lot about managing, controlling, especially looking at risk, etc. Just one other question on the governance track still are the ethical considerations. So as each of you deliver your closing remarks, I'm just wondering if you can think of any ethical considerations that you would like to highlight as we look at AI and an enabling factor in governance across organizations. Oh, sorry, I'll start with Antonio.
No, thank you. Thank you again. And that is a very important thing because in that jargon of artificial intelligence, there is a concept called algorithmisms when we have data bias, and that's pose ethics issues around any kind of decision. So that's another thing that we have to take very clear, because that data keep consistency with quality and integrity. That doesn't mean that don't have bias. So that's the thing that we need to take care of. My close point. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Philip?
I don't know if it's around ethics and stuff like that, but I starting to think the bigger thing that I think a business needs to understand is really more around the nuance of business, and not accepting that AI, whatever AI gives you, is 100% correct. I think it is very important for the business leaders to understand the nuance of the business and think about it more as you know, I guess where it can augment your decisions. I think if you take everything that it says for granted, no matter whether it's your data or not, I think you can get yourself in trouble. So I think it's more of that. You know, I think business leader, it doesn't it doesn't absolve you of your responsibility to still ask the questions as a leader. You know, around that. So that's what I would say.
Okay, thanks, Philip. And George, to close?
To close, really, you know, in a conglomerate, as I said, diverse risks, culture, obligations, brings a lot of complexity into an organization. Using AI as an enabler, complexity meets capability. That's the parting message. And the only other parting message that I want you to remember out of this session is data is the fuel for AI. If you don't have it, you lose it.
Yeah.
Very true.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you too. And so, Kamala, over back to you.